Hi, and welcome to a new Mento event. We're happy to see so many of you already here. We appreciate that you respect the starting time. We're also gonna be spending like 5 minutes to wait for more people to join. So thank you for coming. I'm Ioana, UX Goodies. I will be joined today by the Mento co-founder, Radu. I will let him introduce himself later on, but before we do that, I want to ask all of you to use the chat, go in the chat right now and write your location, the city and country you're joining from. This is a fun icebreaker exercise that we do to get a sense of the geography of this call and understand maybe we could even meet in person someday and you can make new friends. And so this leads me to another point that I want to make. And that is that we use Mento Design Academy events on Meetup to create this sort of networking opportunity for UX designers from all over the world. Of course, the pandemic and everything the past years have accelerated the online networking part of networking. So we're using these opportunities to connect to one another. And we do that in two ways. The first one is that we're going to invite all of you to take a screenshot of this event at any time, maybe jot down a couple of notes, a couple of ideas that you liked and you feel are valuable, and you can share them with the world and share them on a platform of choice, LinkedIn, Instagram, wherever. But this will help you spark design conversations, meet new people, maybe find new design friends. And so it's a networking opportunity to use the content from the events. It's not just for Mento events. Whenever you take part in a conference or an event, use it as an opportunity, use the content as an opportunity to create something, share your own ideas, share the most interesting thoughts and connect with people over them. And then in the later part of the event, at the end, we're going to be spending 5-10 minutes to share our LinkedIn profiles, all of us. And then I will invite everyone to go through the links, meet one another, connect, and then hopefully this conversation will continue on different platforms. And it's not just a one-off, here we are, and then we can remain friends and have future conversation as well. So this is the networking component of our events. And another component that I want to mention before we start diving into the conversation of this day, which is how to land a UX job after you've graduated from a bootcamp. The last part I want to mention is that at Mento Design Academy, and for those of you who don't know who we are a UX design bootcamp. And we have just launched a couple of months ago already, I think, a referral program. And so if you recommend Mento Design Academy to anyone in your network and they write your email in the where did you find out about Mento question, you will get $100 from us. So this is something that we try to encourage people to help us reach more people because we want to provide good design education to as many folks as possible. So with this, with all these mentions out of the way, I feel like I've done my checklist and we can go ahead and start today's event. Thank you for everyone. Thanks to everyone who filled in their city and country in the chat. Continue to write your location if you haven't already. It's a fun exercise, and just a couple of details about how today's event will unfold. We have prepared a set of questions based on the most common questions we get around landing the job after a bootcamp and the questions that you submitted on Instagram. And we will be going through these questions. And at the end, we're going to spend 15 minutes, 20 minutes going through live questions. We're going to take the live questions from the chat as well. So as you get ideas around what questions you want to ask, pop them in the chat and I will go through them and we'll try to answer as many live questions as possible. So once again, thank you for being here, for everybody who joined in the meantime. Now I'm going to invite my co-founder at Mento Design Academy, Radu, who's a very senior design leader, probably one of the most senior people in the design industry right now. And I'm going to invite him to give a short intro about himself, his career, background, and everything, just that you understand where we stand from in this conversation. Radu, you have the stage.
Thank you, Ioana, and hi, everyone. Welcome to our little event where we're going to talk about getting a job after you've graduated from a bootcamp. My name is Radu. I've been a designer for about 17 years, so quite some time now. I've got the opportunity to work for a lot of very large or small companies such as Adobe, Fitbit, from the more well-known companies in the world, also quite a lot of startups. And I've been mentoring for the past, I think, 5 years now, something like that. And I've helped probably over 70 students transition to a career in design. I think I was counting a couple of months ago the number of hours I've mentored, and there were over 1,000 hours. So that's quite a lot. And I'm happy to be here and share all of my tips, tricks, and thoughts on securing a role after completing your bootcamp.
Yay, we're lucky. I'm lucky to have you as a co-founder at our bootcamp, but also I think we're lucky to get to pick your brains. And also I'll be sharing some of the wisdom that I've accumulated over the years. It's not much, but I hope it's going to be valuable. So let's dive straight into the topic now. The most common question I get on Instagram, and probably even in the admission calls in our bootcamp, we also invite people to book a free call with us where they can explore their fears and questions around transitioning into UX design. So the most common question we get is, can I get a job in UX with just a bootcamp? Is it possible without having any design education formally, like university or a degree, or prior experience? So is it possible to get a job without experience? Is a bootcamp enough? So Radu, what are your thoughts on that? What has been your experience?
Well, I could begin by stating the fact that I don't have a formal education in design. So I'm a self-taught designer. I started back when Zoom didn't exist or a broadband internet connection. So that's a very long time ago. I don't know if everybody in this room knows what a dial-up connection is. And that's how I get to feel old. So you can definitely get a design role without formal education. Also, another, I would say, myth is companies want you to have a formal education. And to be honest, I've interviewed all over the world, and I've never or rarely been asked about my formal studies. So generally, companies will want to see your portfolio. They will want to see what you're able to do, what's your knowledge, what are your skills, how do you work or collaborate. But it's rare that they'll ask, that, okay, so how do you know all of these? Where do you know them from? Oh, you don't have a diploma. That's too bad. We don't want to hire you. So that's not the case. And I think what a bootcamp essentially is, so it took me quite a long time. Part of it is because we had very, very slow internet and resources weren't as abundant as today. But also the other thing is, so it took me a long time because of that. And then because I didn't have any guidance, I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't know what to learn, where to look, what kind of resources were good, what kind of resources I shouldn't be looking at. So it took me a very long time. And essentially what I think is a bootcamp is no more than something that accelerates that. So it tells you what to look at, what to pay attention to, what should you learn, and it shares a lot of knowledge from the industry. You could, I guess, learn all of it, and I did, by yourself, but it's going to take probably like 3, 4, 5 years instead of like 6, 9 months, roughly.
Great points. I also come from a non-design background. So I studied in school economics and public relations, so nothing to do with design. I think in Romania, you don't even have a design university that you can go, not even today. So we don't have formal education. And indeed, I've also interviewed with companies from all over the world, and this never came up. It's true that I've seen job descriptions at like the FANG companies, the companies that everybody wants to get in. Like I've been on the Google recruiting platform, and I know that for some jobs, they mention that they require a design degree, probably because it's really hard for them to navigate all the potential candidates. They get the best of the best. And so to make it easier to filter out, maybe they put more conditions that don't necessarily make more sense. But I've seen it. It's possible. But again, this is if you want. So I want to make sure that people who are considering a UX transition are not illusional or disillusional about delusional is the word, about being able to land their first job at Airbnb or Spotify or Google or whatever. I mean, it's possible, but it's very, very unlikely, because typically they give internships to people who do have a design education, a design background, who have been studying design for the past couple of years before applying to an internship. So this is like the 1% of companies where everybody wants to get in. So for most companies, design degrees are not necessary. And this is why bootcamps exist. And this is why we have a lot of success stories from many bootcamps. Of course, there are also stories of people who are struggling to find design jobs after bootcamps. That's true, it's a reality. But many people with the determination and the right set of ingredients that we will go through in the conversation coming up, you can definitely land a job without having obviously prior experience, because that was my question. So I'm gonna move into the second question. And this is a fear that I run into very often when talking to people on UX goodies and even outside. People are scared that the market is too saturated already, that there are too many UX designers and that it's super competitive. And so it's going to be impossible for them to land a job in this landscape. What are your feelings and thoughts on that?
Absolutely true. It's a good fear to have. If you are mediocre, if you do not put in the time or the work, there's a lot of competition outside, right? There's a lot of people that are at the same level as you, and the lower your skill set or your involvement or your dedication, the higher the competition. The more things you do to set yourself apart from the crowd, the smaller the competition. It's still going to be a little competition, obviously, as with any popular field in which you can have a decent salary, good benefits, all of that, right? People will move to that. But I would say why maybe some people experience overwhelming competition is they haven't spent time setting themselves apart from the crowd, from everyone who's doing the bare minimum to get in this, right? They read a book or they watch 2 YouTube videos and they put down UX designer. Well, sure, if we consider that competition, then yes, the competition is huge. But if you take the time to study, to understand what you're doing, your craft, and how to set yourself apart from this big pool of doing the bare minimum, then I would say the competition is not as high as you may think.
Yeah, and I also want to add on top of that it is a competitive field because it's a nice job to have, and it's a job that's very desirable for many people, and that's because you get to have a variety of work that you will be doing, and it's pretty versatile. It accommodates a lot of background. So I can totally understand why people are drawn to this career. And so that makes the landscape pretty competitive. But at the same time, I feel that the industry is growing. If you look, probably there are like, it's a curve, right? Sometimes, like right now, it's a recession. Some companies are freezing their hiring processes. It's a moment in time. We've seen it when the pandemic was just starting, the same kind of freezing in the market. And so, but I think it's like in the double diamond process, right? So sometimes it's opening up, it's growing a lot of new possibilities, even for junior designers. And then sometimes it's contracting. But overall, the market is growing, and we know that if you don't know, I'm going to mention it now. Jacob Nielsen has predicted that we're going to have like 100 million UX professionals in the world by 2050, which means 1% of the entire world's population is going to be a UX designer. And we can, myself and Radu, by talking to a lot of startups, companies, there's a strong need. There's some companies are desperate to find designers. They even look in the junior pool, and the best junior designers already have other opportunities. So for many companies, it's really hard to get the right people. And so there's still, from where we see, there's a lot of room for new people to join the industry. But it's true that, of course, you have to put in the work. So it's not like that, because if it were like 1 week or 1 month of studying and then you get your UX job, everybody would be a UX designer. It's not easy, and it's not supposed to be easy. So if you think about the fact that to become a doctor, you go and study for 8-10 years or whatever, studying for 1 year to become a UX designer sounds pretty fair, but you do have to study and put in the effort, and put in the effort to ask for feedback on your portfolio, continuously iterate it, keep your motivation, be consistent, be disciplined. So it's not easy. It's not easy, but it's absolutely doable. And we have a lot of students from Mento, and we've seen from other boot camps, many people who have successfully managed to land UX jobs quite fast. So it's absolutely doable. Well, Now, Radu, you've talked about how to that you must put in the work and you must do the right things in order to stand out in the job hunt. So what are those things in your perspective and in your experience? You've hired a lot of people. You were hiring for Google before it was, when it was still Fitbit, you were hiring, you've built a big design team. What do you look at when you hire junior or mid designers, but also what are the things that help people stand out when they're just starting out in the design industry?
Right. Really good question, and one that I'm very passionate about. So the first thing to understand, and this comes from a designer's mindset, right? Kind of thinking at who's your audience and what is their day-to-day life looking. When companies hire, they don't interview like 1,000 people and then pick the best, right? So if you what you want to do, the first thing you want to do is jump in front of the queue as much as possible, because if you're in the queue, let's say you're number 51, and then the company interviews 50 people, and at the 50th they found a good fit, they're going to hire that person, and then the position is closed, right? So the thing you want to do is jump in front of the queue. And now let's kind of think of the day-to-day life of a hiring manager or a recruiter. If you're working for a more popular company, it's not uncommon that you'll get 50 to 100 applications every day. If you dedicate 5 minutes to each application, that means opening the application, reading their resume, looking at the portfolio, understanding where that person is from, if you can hire them, are they located in the country that you're hiring in, and all of that. You'd have to work for about 8, I think if I remember my math, 8.5 hours nonstop. And this does not happen because as a hiring manager or as a recruiter, you also have a lot of other duties and tasks in your company. You have to attend to meetings, you have to go out to lunch, and you have to eat, you have to do all of those other things that you do when you're not in a hiring status. But then you also, so you have all of your other tasks, but then on top of that, when you have to hire someone, you have all of these tasks. So generally, people in a company have very little time to review your application. So if your application doesn't stand out or it doesn't communicate easily, let's say you've hidden your contact data, your project is password protected, all of these things that I see so often designers doing, then you're making it now that person needs to spend time contacting you and asking for the password, or they got to ask for your phone number, or they can't find your portfolio. That's very difficult. So what they'll do is probably they won't dismiss you completely, but what they'll do is they'll move on to the next candidate so that they're efficient, right? Because their goal is to hire someone. So one of the best things that you can do is jump in front of the hiring queue by making your portfolio and your projects accessible, easy to understand. One of my favorites, and I think after saying it for about a year, LinkedIn came out and posted about this as well and said the same thing, is you want your application to stand out. So how can you do that? Well, if you again think of that mass of people that are doing the bare minimum, most people when they apply, they just attach their resume, or at best their resume and their portfolio. Very few of them spend time writing a personal message in their application, or very few people spend time writing a cover letter explaining how their experience maps on the role that they applied for, especially if you have a very different experience. So say you've been a graphic designer and you're applying for a visual designer position, it's super important to communicate, this is why I think I'm good for the role, because I understand my experience doesn't show that, or my resume doesn't show that I would have experience as that role, and this is why I want you to understand why am I applying. For example, I had one time someone applying, and their position on LinkedIn said musician, and they applied for a designer position. I was like, so is this a musician applying for a designer position, or is a designer also doing music applying for a designer position? And when this confusion happens, I much rather move on to the next portfolio or the next candidate that might look more fit for the role than, spend like 20, 30, 40 minutes kind of trying to uncover and dig for the information that I'm looking for. So if you want to stand out, you simply need to make the information available to the recruiter or the hiring manager. And then the thing that I was saying about LinkedIn, and that I've mentioned it a year before LinkedIn came out, was what if instead of sending a wall of text or applications or PDFs, you send a video? Hey, I'm Radu. I'm a product designer. I love, say, Spotify as a company. I've been using it for 10 years, and I would love to be a designer for in your team. Here's like 3 reasons for I think that is. And because you have now you've included a video, how many other people's included a video? Well, I'll tell you, none. And I have actual data to prove this because I was recently hiring for my own design studio. And I specifically asked in the recruiting post, please, or ideally, submit a video of yourself, like 30 seconds, a minute, just saying, why you think you're fit for the position. And even when I specifically called it out and asked for it, 2 people out of 100 submitted a video. And obviously, I spoke first with the people that put in the effort of meeting the requirements, right? So, so these are a couple of things that you can do to jump in front of the queue. Make sure your application is thoughtful, that you put effort in it, and that you try to stand out by either including a video or a cover letter, by making the information super easy to access. Don't password protect your projects. Don't make either the recruiter or the hiring manager hunt for the information or need to spend more time just to get to what they're interested in. The more they spend, the more likely it is that they will move on to the next candidate.
Okay, and I have something to ask on top of that. So we've had a couple of people in the Mento Design Academy. So our bootcamp is pretty new. We launched last year, so we're seeing the first generations of people landing jobs, and we've seen plenty of people landing jobs before graduations. What were the behaviors? So, and many of them were mentored by you. So what were the behaviors that you feel made them most successful in landing a job so quickly? So even before finishing the bootcamp, what do you think is like the key behavior or the key things that make you more successful in your job hunt, even without like getting there to struggle? They didn't even have the chance to really struggle because somehow the jobs just happened. What were they? How did they stand out? If you know very well, because they were your mentees.
Right. I'll answer that. Sorry, I had to kick someone off because I saw they were trying to pick up a fight in the chat. So sometimes it happens that, unfortunately, we're all here to learn. Cool. So what do people do to get jobs even before they finish a boot camp? Is they start doing, right? It's I think maybe a lot of us were trained in school, right? In school, when you submit something like an assignment, you cannot take it back and improve it, right? It's usually like you've submitted it and you get a grade, and that is it, right? And I think that has conditioned us to wait for the perfect time to do something or the perfect time to submit an assignment, which is totally not how the tech industry works, right? It is not. In tech, because we're all learning and it's a new and ever-evolving field, we all learn on a day-to-day basis, and we all try stuff. We see if it works or fails, and we improve on it, right? So I would say it's the same with applying, right? The first interview that I went to, oh my God, I was so bad at it. I would just like sit at a table and just wait to be asked questions, and I would answer really straight and to the point, and I would tell no stories. And obviously, no surprise, I didn't get many offers back then. But then when I did more and more of this and I practiced more, I ended up I ended up performing better in those interviews. So the first thing to actually be able to get a role is to start applying or getting interest or talking to people and expressing either interest or desire to be a designer, to break into the industry, to do design work. And then, it's also obviously something contextual, and it may happen for you or may not. If you might check everything off, but might not be the right time, or you might not have the right context. But you wouldn't know if you don't try, right? If you don't go out there and put yourself out there. So, for example, one of our most successful students, she started posting a lot about her journey. She started talking about it, and obviously that makes you visible. And this is actually something that we teach our students to do right in the program. Very early on, as we say, okay, well, now you've written a few materials about what you're doing. Now try to post one, and don't do this just once. Do it every week, because by the end of the bootcamp, you want to already have people knowing you're doing this. If you're only starting when you finished your, say, training, whatever that may be, course, bootcamp, self-study, if you're only starting then obviously it's going to take a very long time for you to ramp up, because these things take time until people get to know you, get to hear you, you start building an audience, right? So to get a job even before you finish your bootcamp, you got to start making yourself visible as someone who's doing design, who's interested in design. And funny enough, this is also gonna help you stand out from like the mass that I told you of people that are doing the bare minimum, because people just go read a book and then go like, I'm a UX designer, why is no one hiring me? Well, that's like everybody's doing that, right? You need to do something extra, or you might be lucky, but it doesn't mean that once you read a book or watched a YouTube video or did a small course, you can write UX design, you can start applying to jobs, and people will right out hire you, right? You need to do the work. So kind of making yourself visible will help you achieve your goals sooner.
I totally second that. I'm like probably one of the most visible people in UX design. So I honestly, truly believe that it's important. So I feel that for some people, this doesn't come naturally. So it feels like social media is silly. I don't want to be there. They're confident that they can find jobs in other ways, which is fair. But the truth is that most of the UX jobs, they're online. They're either on LinkedIn or on different platforms, or they're in your network. So you have to be where the jobs are, even if it's silly or uncomfortable or I have nothing to say. It's okay if you have nothing. You don't have to be a design leader from day one. You can just share things that you've learned or things that you don't know and you want to learn more about. So you can talk about anything, but you have to be where the jobs are and where the hiring managers, the recruiters are. And many times that's on LinkedIn. And I've also had mentees who were not social media people. So they didn't have the reflex of going out and posting things and then putting it's a form of being vulnerable, right? So for people who don't enjoy that, it's pretty stressful, especially when you're in the early days. You're probably experiencing imposter syndrome. Am I good for this career? Am I going to be a good UX designer? It adds a layer of anxiety probably for many people. But if you push through it, nobody will judge you. I've never seen someone go to a junior designer on social media and tell them, you're wrong. You don't understand what you're talking about. Nobody does that. I mean, it's really a faux pas on any level. So probably senior designers have debates and they're mean to each other, but nobody's mean to a junior designer, because we all accept that it's a vulnerability. It's a difficult moment in time, and most people are supportive. So don't worry, nobody will come after you and expose you as a fraud. And so put yourself out there, because that's where the jobs are. And I've also had mentees who were talking with people in real life. So if it's really you're opening up to a smaller landscape, right? So it's like talking to 3 people, where online you might have the opportunity of talking to 300 people. But even so, I've had a student from Japan that she got 2 job offers from her not immediate network, but by talking to people in her immediate network, who then pointed her out to other people who were hiring for junior designers. And she got 2 job offers before graduation just by talking about what she's doing. So that's incredibly powerful, but you need to do it. I see people who, like Radu said, just do the bare minimum. They don't feel the need to to tell the world, right? So this is something that helps you stand out. That's pretty easy to achieve. But then also being able, I would add very briefly, being able to articulate your own unique value proposition. So what makes you special as a UX designer is the combination of your personality, the background you come from. Many people have unique backgrounds, interesting combinations of experience and jobs that they've been doing before. So if you work with a mentor, it's the easiest way to understand what's your value proposition, who you are, how do you define yourself, and what makes you hireable, right? And then tell that story again and again, practice it with mock interviews, with mentors, with applying to jobs. Like Radu said, put yourself out there, but be able to tell the story of why you are special in a way, because everybody is, but you just have to find the right elements that make you special. So these are a couple of things that are top of mind. We probably could talk for hours about how to stand out, but I also want to talk about the don'ts of the job hunt. So what you should definitely avoid, and I have one that I'm gonna start up front, just put it out there. So this is something that I've seen people do a lot of LinkedIn, and I've seen a lot of design leaders complain about it. So maybe that someone posts a job and then the person writes, I'm interested, or they just hit the like button and then they wait for that person to write back to them and tell them, okay, you can come and apply, please. Don't be so passive when you are applying for jobs. So if you just hit easy apply, it's really too little, because 10,000 people hit easy apply for the same job. So go the extra mile and don't be passive in your job hunt. This is a big don't. Waiting for people to come to you. You're not a billboard that someone walks by and says, okay, I want that person, unless you're very, very experienced and senior, in which case that will happen to you. But as a junior designer, you have to go get things. So this is the first thing I want to mention. Yeah, easy apply, exactly. So Radu, from your experience, what are the don'ts of the first job hunt? Why do people have a hard time, and what should be avoided?
Oh, don't. Um, I think just generally being passive and just expecting people to reach out or do their work for you is something you'd want to avoid. Like I mentioned, do not hide your work. I mean, this is not about not being able to display it, but there's so many people intentionally like putting their work behind passwords, not communicating the password to the recruiter, being passive, not doing anything extra to stand out, not communicating. I think these are easily some of the things that that will slow you down in finding the right job, and not having a good story. I don't know if it's like a don't, but don't just go in there without a good story about why you're doing this, because this is kind of what will land you that first role. It's more about who you are and why you're doing this. Obviously, because it's the first role that you won't have a lot of portfolio to show. You won't have a lot of skills, expertise. You're there to learn. You're just starting out. So people hire more based on why you're doing this. What's your motivation? We will still come to work a month later. I mean, are you decided you want to do this, or is it just like trying the waters and, I can't rely on you? So giving out a good story, and this is, for example, something we ask our students to do, is to create this cohesive story about themselves. What is the background that you're coming from? What is kind of the industry that you want to work in, right? So say I come from the hospitality industry. I want to work still in the hospitality industry because I think I have a lot of experience interacting with customers, but I want to be a designer in the hospitality industry. And then these are the companies that I want to work for, right? I want to work for OpenTable because I've been using their product for months and I'm super passionate about it. And having that story cohesive and having that connected with showing relevant work because you had a cohesive story will help you out. Not having that, just going out, just with the bare information and sort of like a scrappy portfolio project and that's it. Yeah, that's going to be very hard to land any role.
And I want to add something to that. And I think what I'm about to add will also answer one of the questions that came in the chat about being rejected for a long, long time. I think that what you should do at some point after being ignored or rejected for a long time is to stop and try to understand why. So apply the UX process to your job hunt and put on your detective hat and try to understand, why am I not getting called back? Why are people rejecting me? Where is the point in the recruitment journey where I'm failing? Am I failing in the interview because, I don't know, I'm not articulate enough? Or am I failing because I don't pass the portfolio screening? Is my portfolio not good? How can I improve it? And so be a detective on why you're not getting interviews and where you're getting stuck, and then try to continuously improve and iterate on the way you apply and on the entire process. So it's just UX work. If you think you're UXing your job hunt. And I think that one way to go about it is to talk to different mentors. So sometimes, like Radu was saying in the beginning, when you're a junior designer, you don't know what you don't know. So it's very important. That's why we called our bootcamp Mento. It's super important to reach out to mentors as much as possible. And the mentor, it's not necessarily someone that you get in a bootcamp only. You can find them on LinkedIn, people that come from similar backgrounds to yours, and so you have something in common with them. People who work in companies that you're interested. So just people who you know and are already designers. So reach out to people who you might have something in common with, and just ask them for feedback on your portfolio, continuously improve it. Because sometimes we do the bare minimum, we do the portfolio. It's been a lot of work. It's draining to build your portfolio. You feel like relieved, I finally did it. And then the last thing you want to do is continue to work on it. So you sort of abandon it, but that's what might be causing failing the interview. So definitely continuously improve and try to understand where it is you're failing in the rejected path.
I want to add a quick story to that, just to highlight how these things can happen and you can be completely blind. So, you get a rejection, you don't know why. So I have the story. I have a very good friend. He was actually a senior designer before I was, and I got to work with him in a past job. And then we went our separate ways, separate companies. And while I was working at Fitbit, in the meantime, he got really interested in mobile development, iOS specifically. So he learned, he self-studied, and he got really good. And he has like 5 apps out there on the App Store. They're doing really well. So one day he saw a job hire post at Fitbit for an iOS developer, and he applied. And he didn't get any answers for like a month. So this was a person that had like 20 years of experience. So it's not only about juniors. This person was super skilled. So obviously, knowing that I work for Fitbit, he called me and was like, Radu, I applied and I didn't get any responses. I don't understand why. I have so much experience, so much relevant experience. And I knew the recruiter that was handling the role. So I asked her, like, hey, this guy, my friend, applied. Why didn't he get a response? And the exact thing that I just mentioned happened. The recruiter went on his profile and he saw designer, and he applied for an iOS developer position. It did say somewhere that he launched apps and he self-studied as an iOS developer, but he didn't specifically crafted his resume and his profile on LinkedIn to say, hey, I'm an iOS developer. This is what you're looking for. So his message wasn't clear. His application wasn't clear, despite the 20 years of experience, both in design and development. So he didn't make it clear. So he didn't even get a rejection. He did not get any message at all for like 2 or 3 weeks. And this is because exactly what I said. He made it too complicated for the recruiter to understand what he was doing and what was he offering, and they preferred to move on to the next candidate that made that more clear. And that was the exact answer of the recruiter. So, you might be super skilled and still get no answer, and that is because you're doing the same mistakes that I mentioned.
Yeah, I also have an example. Recently, there was a student, a bootcamp graduate from a different bootcamp, who reached out to me to have their portfolio reviewed. And I looked on LinkedIn, and the first thing that I see is that she branded herself as a content designer and writer. I was like, are you going for the journalism job, or do you want to be a writer, or do you want to be a UX designer? And she was like, I'm not sure yet. And when you're not sure yet, that's fine. but you have to make a decision at least on how you present yourself to the world. Because if you're not sure yet and you tell the world, I'm not sure yet, then nobody will know what to hire you for. So it's okay to have doubts, but sort of decide how you will communicate yourself, at least for the next couple of months. Okay, so I have a lot of my final question before going into the questions that came in the chat. Thanks to everyone who has been asking questions. Continue to ask them, even if we can't answer all of them right now. We will create some content on Mento Design Academy on Instagram, or we will try to answer them on LinkedIn if we connect afterwards, so we won't leave them hanging. But my last question is around the portfolio, which is a very, very juicy and annoying subject for most people who try to break into the design industry. And my question to you is fairly simple. And I mean, it's simple, but it's complicated, like everything in UX design. How many case studies should someone feature in their junior portfolio? Because some people feel like they have to make up 6 case studies, and because that's how you're more competitive if you show more work. But how should a junior designer go about their first portfolio, and what are some immediate tips and tricks that you think about when it comes to portfolios?
I'm going to give a designer's favorite answer. It depends. I'm going to make a t-shirt with that. It depends. So I would say, let's go back to the reason for why you're doing a portfolio, especially with someone who's just starting out. You're trying to provide, you're trying to show that you're able to apply the knowledge that you got into something that can create some sort of impact, right? Can materialize into something, right? This is what because everybody can read the theory and understand the theory. What you want to do is show a potential employer, hey, I can also apply it. Here's how I've done it, right? I understand the best practices for research. Here's how I've done some research, right? So I can show you. So then to the question of how many projects should I have in my portfolio? Well, obviously not too many, just because it would be difficult to evaluate and understand. Another good thing to remember is you're always being judged by your weakest project. So kind of once you're done, you should decide like which one is the weakest and take it out, because you would much rather have less with higher quality than more. And I think this is the general mistake that I see with a lot of designers starting out, is they think the more they show, the better. And this becomes even more detrimental to their own success when that particular designer comes from a background of, say, graphic or art. So they'll go like, here's my UX portfolio, and like they have 10 things and like 6 they're paintings. So the recruiter goes like, I don't understand, like, what am I hiring here, right? And this is actually something that I see a lot of times. So it's not, fantasy. I'm not telling you stories here that didn't happen. This is actually from my experience of reviewing probably hundreds and hundreds of applications, right? So the number of projects that you show, which ideally should be around 2 or 3, always keep up your best 2 or 3 projects. There's really no need to show more than that, right? If you have 2 or 3 really good projects, that's more than you need. And the number between 1 and 3 depends on how many skills did you get to apply on that specific project. So say a project gave you a lot more opportunities to do research. Another project gave you a lot more opportunities to do interaction design and visual design. Another project gave you the opportunity of showing your business acumen more, right? So how many skills did you get to apply in that project? And if you checked most of them, then you could have one project. If you focus more on research on one project, then you could say, hey, the next project, I want to focus more on UI, because I feel like I haven't shown really my skills around UI design in this one. So I do another project, right? And obviously these projects need to be aligned with your background, what's your passion, experience. So it's not only about how many, but also about the quality, and does it make sense for that project to exist there? The most common mistake I see here is just doing a lot of unsolicited redesigns, going like, I thought Spotify was badly designed, so just starting out as a designer, I thought I could do better, and I redesigned Spotify. You're not showing a lot of low ego here. thinking you could do a better job than an army of designers at Spotify, but fine, right? So the quality of the project matters more, and why they're there in the story for those projects matters more than the number of them. But sort of to answer the question to the point, I don't see the need for having more than 3 projects in your portfolio at a max.
I absolutely second that. I think that I've seen people land their first UX jobs with one project, but indeed that project was most of the times a real project where they went hands-on, solving a design problem, most of the times with a real client or a real team, and it's just a matter of getting that first opportunity where you have to handle a lot of complexity, and then you can tell that story, which is more impressive than, like Radu was mentioning, unsolicited redesigns, or things that feel made up or they feel forced, like just to fill in the space in your portfolio. You don't want to have that. You want to focus on having less work but stronger quality, and that shows collaboration, which is super important for a UX designer, and maybe working with a real client. And probably your follow-up question would be, okay, but how do I get that if nobody's going to hire me, if I have absolutely no experience to find a real job and a real project? How am I going to get that? But there are ways. We've talked about it in our past events, and there's a lot of content about that on our Instagram pages. Very briefly, you can volunteer to work on NGOs, which there are platforms. One of them is uxrescue.org, and the other one is democracylab.com. You can go there and try looking for volunteering opportunities. You can volunteer to work for friends and family in your network. Most probably someone has an online shop or restaurant, a small business that you can help them with improving. And you can definitely try looking at hackathons, which are more rare, but that's an interesting opportunity of working with cross-functional teams. And another way is just to do a passion project, but maybe do it very seriously, like talk to real people, find maybe potential clients in that market that you can help. So as much as possible, do real work. That's what it means to have one strong case study, apart from many flimsy fillers, filler projects. Okay, let's jump in. So we have like 30 minutes left from this wonderful meetup. We have a lot of questions in the chat. I'm gonna try to pick the ones who haven't been answered in one way or another yet. We have a question from Chandriana. I hope I didn't butcher your name. If you're unable to volunteer work, builds on top of my last line. If you're unable to get volunteer work due to time availability, but you're able to complete challenges or passion projects to continue adding to your portfolio, is that good? Should you really try to get volunteer work or contract work, since there's a desire to see how your product can show the results of an ROI? Well, I answered that. I just answered it. Actually, it's better to have real projects. So even if you want to do UI challenges or anything, those are not as valuable as a real project. So as much as possible, find time to do real projects. I don't know if Radu wants to add anything to that. I think it's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
I think I want to answer that. So I want to define quickly what a real project means, because it does seem like there's some misunderstanding here. And most people think, a real project is only a project where I got to work with an existing company, which I would say it's not true. A real project means not going, I'm just going to redesign Spotify just because, or I'm gonna do the bike shop, or better yet, I saw this in a boot camp. Can you design a website for a time travel company? And you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how many boot camps, how many programs prompt students to do that. Can you please redesign the website for this bike shop to increase for conversion? But there's no website yet to speak of. So how can you improve something that doesn't exist, right? So real project means, even if you're super passionate, say, about recycling, and you start interviewing people, talking to them, understanding the domain and the problems better, and trying to find some solutions for that, that's a real project. That is not a made up project, because you are trying to solve you validate it and trying to solve a real problem. A real project is not designing a website for a time travel company. That's the issue. That's where most of the portfolios that I see failing is with this fictitious sort of themes that do not really exist, or problems that are just being handed out. Like, this company has this problem. Well, how do we know that? It's a fictitious company. How do we know there's actually that problem? So that's how I would define a real project.
I have an interesting question that I picked up from the chat. Victoria is asking us if you're a career switcher and still working full-time, which most people are, so to be able to sustain the cost of a bootcamp, most people keep their current job until they can find a UX job. So it's pretty common. How would you go on about making posts and updating your LinkedIn profile without the risk of being reprimanded or having your current company question you? That's an interesting question. That's similar to the NDA issue in the portfolio, but this one is like, how do I talk about my transition if I don't want my employer to know? Do you have any idea around that? I have something in mind.
Well, I was about to say, I think you're the better person to answer this question.
Yeah, so what I would do, I actually have a mentee right now that's in the same situation. So she's on maternity leave from her company, and she doesn't want the company to know that she's planning on switching jobs when she's back. So she's in the same situation. And what she did is that she created a sort of not anonymous, but more cryptic Instagram page that's solely dedicated to her UX journey. And she's talking about it, posting about a UX journey, but it's not on her personal profile where people can see her stuff. It's on a new, completely new account where people are not able to trace her and connect the identities unless they do like detective work, which is also possible. But she created a completely new account where she's sort of in the shadow and putting content about it. And it's true that on Instagram, you're probably not gonna land as many job opportunities as you might on LinkedIn. But another thing that you might be doing is write on Medium or on places that you're not necessarily connected to your work coworkers, right? You can go on Medium, write about just learning something new, that you're passionate into this. You could even frame it like, I want to be a better professional in my current role, so I'm learning UX design. So I think you can frame it in a way that doesn't feel conflicting and not make it too obvious, or go into places where they might see it for sure. So go on Medium, go on Instagram, go on places where you can kind of keep it low key. I think that's what I would do. I hope that answers your question.
I would also add maybe just realizing, hey, not all of these tips and tricks will be applicable to you. So even if we say, go out there, post, like with some companies, you'll be able to say, hey, I'm looking for a transition, and they'll be super understanding. They'll even help you out. Like, for example, in a past role that I had, the assistant to the VP was looking to transition to UX. So he allowed her to attend all of our meetings as a team. So that might happen. And in some contexts, if your boss finds out that you're learning to switch careers, they will fire you right away. And in some countries, that's possible and legal, such as, say, the United States. It's easier to fire people. In Europe, they could not be doing that. So it depends a lot on the context and what you're doing. It might not be applicable to you. That's the reality. And it might be a little more difficult for you to do the same things that others do. This is why at Mento, we take this very tailored approach of, hey, let's understand your context. It's not, something that we don't treat students and people like they're the same blank canvas. Everybody has their very different context, right? That's what I wanted to add.
It's a very good point. And I'm the assistant that has transitioned. I was an assistant before becoming a UX designer. So I'm not that example, but I am like same situation. So the last questions we're gonna take today, and then we can start sharing our LinkedIn profiles so we can connect with one another and see each other in future events or on LinkedIn or whatever. The last question I'm gonna ask is from Shani. If I am in one country looking for a job in the UX UI design field in another, is that an issue? Will it make the hiring process more difficult? Is it possible to receive a job that way, or is it a must to be in the country that you're seeking a job in? Radu, I know that you have a very international experience, both with recruiting and with searching for jobs. So What's your take on that?
Absolutely. So it really, first off, depends if you're open to relocation or not. Before the pandemic, a lot of these jobs, people were like, I was even contacted. The furthest that I traveled was from Central Europe to Canada for an interview. I think it was like 20-hour flight, very long way to interview. And so that wasn't a problem back then. Now with the pandemic and with the openness to remote work, companies are realizing they can tap talent in other countries, talent that they might not have had access to in their current country. So I would say this is increasingly more permissive. You could, and generally what I'm seeing right now is they're looking for a decent overlap in terms of time zone. So at least like 4 or 3 hours, right? But I would say it's long stopped to be a problem, like being in one country and applying to be a designer in another country, unless you're across the globe, and collaboration would be extremely difficult. I would say that's probably one challenge.
Yeah, and the only thing I want to add, so it's fairly possible that for US jobs, they have the condition that you're based in the US. I think for not necessarily tax reasons, but for like legal reasons, they have this, some jobs have the requirement that you are based in the US. But in Europe, things are way more flexible. So you can definitely, except for Great Britain, I think, which because of the political situation, they might require just people from the UK for some jobs. But even if some companies support you with the working visa that you need and all the conditions, so it's not a rule. You can get jobs even in the US. So I've worked with startups in the US as a freelancing designer. So that's totally possible. But it might be that some countries, because of the legislation or tax context, might have this rule. But to answer your question, bottom line is that you can definitely apply to jobs outside your country, and you can even relocate. And we have a lot of examples around us of people who are moving to different countries for their job. That's totally doable. And because of the acceleration of remote, you can also work remote for companies without needing to leave your country. I'm so sorry we don't have time for more questions, because this conversation was so packed, and I feel like myself and Radu, we obviously work every day together, but we don't have the time to sit down and just talk like we did right now. So it was really a nice experiment for us to remember the good old days when we were starting out the bootcamp, and what was motivating us and what was the driver behind everything. So thanks to everyone who joined. Like I said in the beginning, I hope that you took a screenshot, wrote an interesting note, shared some thoughts or some ideas on LinkedIn, on Instagram, wherever you want. It's gonna help you like at least start a conversation with people with similar interests, which is a win. And if you want to point people towards Mento Design Academy, that would be great. We would really appreciate it. And we offer the $100 referral as well. And I think I said everything that I had to say in terms of marketing things. And I just want to honestly thank you for being here. It was a really good turnout. Many people came, they stayed. So it means that this conversation was interesting, and we're happy. We hope to see you at future Mento events, because we're planning more interesting talks for people trying to break into the UX industry. And I think that's it. Radu, if you have a couple of closing thoughts, and I'm going to just share my LinkedIn as well in the chat.
Right. I just want to answer a question for people who might have joined later. We will be posting this recording. So the whole session was recorded, and we're going to post it on Meetup right after, probably in the coming days. I think the bottom line with everything that we said today is you want to stand out when you apply, and you want all of your actions to be intentional. If it's just out of knee-jerk reaction, then it's not going to be successful. And this is where you see a lot of I've applied to 400 jobs, I didn't get a reply. It's because they're not intentional. They don't have a story. They just hit the easy apply button. They count how many times they've hit it. And of course, this is also a numbers game. Like the more jobs you apply to, the higher the chances you'll get a positive answer. But the main idea here is, if you are really intentional about your application to a job, and if you just realize that sometimes it's also about context, right? companies are ramping up hiring or they're ramping down hiring. If you also take a very objective look to things such as they're posting, hey, junior or entry-level designer, but they're asking for 5 years of experience. They're clearly not looking for a junior. Don't apply. Like, that's clear, right? There's no need to do that, and there's no need to get frustrated by that. The other thing I usually say to people that kind of comes contrary to that is, don't get discouraged by job posts, because a lot of times very little thought goes into them. Like, you'll be surprised how little thought goes into job postings. And if I would have to look back to all of the roles that I got hired into, and I would look at the job posts, I would even today, I would say, oh my God, I don't check even like half of this, right? Like PhD in design and stuff like that, I didn't have it, right? So, but this is because very little thought goes into those job posts, unfortunately. So be true to yourself, be true to the company that you're applying to, be intentional about your applications and your job hunt, and I'm sure you're going to see results much faster than you expect. And remember that the competition is at, I did the bare minimum level, and the more you do, the more you reach out, the more you send a video application, the more you do, the higher your chances and the lower the competition. And that's all from me. Thank you guys for tuning in today.
Awesome points. I feel like I want to start applying to jobs. I don't know. This conversation got me motivated to start putting my portfolio back together. So thank you to everyone who joined. We're gonna I'm gonna mute myself, Radu, to stop the video, but we're gonna leave the room open for like 2-3 more minutes so we can share the LinkedIn links and have the time to open them and connect to one another. Don't just share yours, open other people's links, because otherwise it's not gonna work. And yeah, thank you again for being here. We hope we took something valuable out of it, and see you in future events.
Bye. See you, everyone.